people feel depressed after making a lot of money. Now, a super common phenomenon I see a lot is, guys on social media, they suddenly make a lot of money and they start feeling, you know, melancholy. And that's a real world. That's a real word that kind of describes this emptiness feeling where you're not sure what to do anymore. Where you're, and if you notice, there's a lot of mental health stuff that goes on with guys that have a lot of money. And I'm not talking about, therapy. I'm talking about a lot of guys with money. They don't necessarily feel that great about themselves, or they're suffering from depression. They're suffering from a lot of, just in general, just a downward mood, right? Consistently. Now, what does this mean? Does this mean that money has an association and makes people feel bad about themselves? That's not what it means, right? Every time I make money, I actually feel better about myself. I actually feel happier, right? But I have noticed that there is a phenomenon as guys that make a lot of money and they suddenly feel more depressed about themselves. And me, I don't think this is associated with money. I think making a lot of money generally makes you feel happier. But I think the issue is money places you in a position of empowerment where you suddenly are in a position to empower yourself, where you're suddenly in a position where you can pick up the phone and do something that you want to do. People who don't have a lot of money, they tend not to have, they tend not to be in an extreme position in terms of karma, in terms of actions they've done in this world. Because when someone doesn't have access to a lot of money, they don't have access to a lot of opportunity. When you have access to a lot of money, you have access to a lot of opportunity, right? Naturally, with great power and great access to this money, a guy should be more conscious about how his actions affect him, right? You will see what's pretty common in these guys who are focused on making a lot of money. What they do when they make a lot of money, a lot of these guys, they'll do things that destroy themselves, that bring themselves a lot of bad karma. I don't think money makes guys feel bad about themselves. I think money makes people feel good about themselves, and it's generally a good thing. But the problem is a lot of guys that make a lot of money, they suddenly feel like they want to get some life experience in. And some of these guys have a YOLO mindset where they're like, I'm going to use this money to empower myself, all the desires of my physical body. We all have desires of the physical body, right? But there's a right way to do them and there's a wrong way to do them, right? There's such thing as guys that fulfill their desires in a healthy way. There's always a healthier way when you have desires to do things. There's always a healthier way to do them. And there's some guys who utterly destroy themselves and are consumed and controlled by their desires. And this is the problem. When you're being controlled by your desires, there's nothing wrong with having earthly desires, but there's always a healthier way and an unhealthier way of dealing with them. And an unhealthier way of dealing with them is letting your desires control you, letting your desires dictate your life, right? There are karmic results and effects from all the actions that you do. That's why if you're a guy and you're focused on making a lot of money and you're focused on massive levels of success, something that I say and something that my friend says is figure out who you are as a person before you focus on making a lot of money and focus on getting a level of success. And once you figure out who you are as a person, stay grounded in who you are as a person. Because once you start making a lot of money and once you start empowering yourself and you have the power to do things you didn't have to do before, you'll realize if you're not grounded and stable in who you are as a person, you can just be like a leaf in the wind and just be having no direction in your life. Once you know who you are as a person, before you make a lot of money, before you reach a lot of success, you're not going to let things pull you in a specific direction. You are going to be the master of your own ship, right? The captain of your own fate, the leader of your own destiny. And that is one of the best things, best scenarios you can result in.